my name's Saima. I'm a queer Muslim activist from Birmingham, and I became an activist because we had a predominantly Muslim community protesting against inclusive education in schools in Britain.
Awesome. So I'm just going to get on with the questions then. Yeah. So growing up, did you ever feel that your status as a woman made you less worthy than a man? If so, when?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I felt less worthy, because I was really lucky to grow around my mum and her sisters, who were strong females and feminist. However, growing up, I couldn't articulate it when I was younger, but I would see an injustice, that there just wasn't an equality between men and women within our South Asian diaspora. And I wasn't too sure why, but as I've got older, I've been able to articulate it better.
Right. No, that's great. So what are the unique challenges to being a South Asian woman?
So I guess as a Pakistani woman, the problems we have is South Asian men, and in particular Pakistani men, don't recognize the privilege they hold. And in my opinion, it is my personal opinion, women are to blame. So, their mothers put them on a pedestal, tell them they're invincible, and then they get out to the outside world, and that just isn't true. Everyone's an individual, you've got to work hard, you've got to get a job, and there's no hierarchy of privilege. And actually, if anything, South Asian men and women, but South Asian men, when they go out to the working world, they aren't as privileged as the white man. So if we just worked harder with our boys and, taught them about equality, and there's so many things, as a Pakistani, the thing that really grates me is, if you look at the Pakistani laws, in terms of inheritance, a woman only gets a quarter of the inheritance to one of a man. Now, as a queer woman, what does that mean? I don't need a man. I don't need a man to control my life. So I'm going to have a quarter, and then my hypothetical partner is going to get their quarter. So I think there's a lot of things that need to change. And the home countries are to blame, and the backwards laws.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
No, that is brilliant. So why do you feel that in our culture we see a woman's role as nothing more than a wife and a mother?
Yeah, again, it comes back to the home country and the laws. When Pakistan was created, Qaid Azam, amazing man, created Pakistan. But unfortunately, he decided that the law of the land was going to be depicted by the law of God and the law of Islam. Now, Islam isn't the only religion in Pakistan. We have Christians, Sikhs, Hindus. There's all faiths live in Pakistan, and Pakistan itself isn't inclusive enough. So if we haven't got this inclusivity in the home country, how are we going to have it here? So I think a lot of the patriarchal mindsets come from the laws and the legislations that still exist in the home countries. I mean, as a queer woman, it's only in Britain that I can be extremely visible. I'm really lucky to be born here. If I was born in a Muslim country, I know people in Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, and they have to live double lives.
Yeah.
The fear of their life, and it's very strange. It's very strange. So I think one thing I can say to you, so when these school protests started outside schools in 2019 by predominantly Pakistani people, predominantly Pakistani men, one man stood outside the school and proclaimed to the world, he said, God created man, and then he created woman for man's desire. And that there is the mentality of our community. And obviously you don't think like that, but
no, it's not nice to hear that.
Yeah, and I just don't understand what it is. I understand a mother has a bond with her son, but that doesn't mean that you don't equip them with the life skills that they need to be model citizens. So yeah, and you know what? So when these school protests were going on, there was a well-known Pakistani journalist who at the time worked for RT and now works for Al Jazeera. And I was humbled that, I was being interviewed by a South Asian, especially a Pakistani man. And I was looking forward to that interview, thinking, it's going to be great. And you know what? It was such a disappointment. He didn't recognize his privilege. he turned up really arrogant, as if to say, oh, I've traveled the world, I'm so wise. And I was like, great. We had grown up in the same, in working class environments, inner city Birmingham. So I thought, good, boy's done good. Then when he opened his mouth, he still had that depiction of the value of a woman. So I questioned him about the cultures within the culture and the customs within our community. So I said to him, so, well, why is it that it's okay for a young Pakistani lad to, do whatever he wants, sow his oats all over the world, and then go back to Pakistan, get a mail order bride, and then continue that unlawful lifestyle, unfaithful lifestyle. And it obviously hit a nerve, and it obviously triggered him. And I was really hoping for a key debate. So if we, how are we going to progress? The people that have progressed are still backwards. So we have got a long way to go. But the key thing, is the people who have children now, and the people I went to school with, and my friends, I know everyone's raising up their young boys to understand feminism, because it's really important. And that doesn't mean you have to stand with a placard and shout for women's rights. But if we're not equal, things aren't going to happen. And actually, for us as a community, we're only going to progress now if we start being more inclusive of the female voice. Just look at the Muslim Council for Britain. Zahra Mohammed, appointed one of the first female leaders. That's so positive. And that is the future. More female leadership. We do need better inclusivity in mosques as well. You look at mosques, and people want to tiptoe around these subjects, but sometimes you've just got to say it. And we do need, there's so many things, but so as Muslims, I think it would start in the mosque, in the place of worship. And if we can be more inclusive and more visible, it's only going to be better for the future generations.
Definitely. Well, that brings me on to the next question, which is, what is the most important challenge that women face today?
So I think just women as just women, not women
just
of
women
color,
in general.
Black
Yeah,
women,
exactly.
Women. We still are fighting for equal pay. If you look at the top CEOs around the world, that I don't know the stats, but the percentage is very low. So actually, women need to come together, and women need to unite. And the thing that disappoints me the most about our culture is it's always women that are bringing down other women. So the mother-in-law, because the sun, the sun shines out of his asshole, and he's holier than thou, and he wouldn't do anything wrong. And actually, she probably experienced the same thing, and this repetitive cycle just keeps going on. And this isn't all our community, obviously, not everyone. Some people are progressive, but I think we just need to take everyone with us, and really, really work hard on our young boys. But I think the challenges of being a woman is just that we're not equal in the world. We're not equal, and we're nowhere near that. So then if you're a Muslim woman, just look at what happened to Zahra Mohammed on Women's Hour, a really, really messy, offensive, like not researched interview. I don't know if you heard it. It's worth checking out.
I'll definitely check that out.
Campaigners have had an uproar that, the first time we've had a female lead within the MCB, and she gets an interview on Women's Hour, and the woman just starts going for it about why aren't there any female imams? Well, I don't know what she means, because females lead prayer all the time. An imam isn't a priest. It's different. So she was trying to have a like-to-like comparison, and again, that's a colonial mindset again. So women, are not equal. If you're a Muslim or a woman of color or a Black woman, then you even further back. So I think that's why we need to unite.
Well, to continue that question, what needs to change the next 10 years then for women?
So I think
especially in the South Asian community.
South Asian, for us, I think we need to encourage more women to be independent. Obviously for me, it's a bit more difficult for me as a queer woman. I'm so far behind the line. But actually, we need to understand that women are beings of their own. We don't need men to complete this. Obviously, there's heterosexual women and you fall in love, and that's fantastic. But you don't need a man to get you a job or to validate you, basically. And
Yeah.
also, I think, we need to educate our brothers more and more now, and especially the young boys. It really saddens me, especially in Birmingham. There's a rise in knife crime. So the last decade of Tory austerity has just cut youth funding, youth services. But in Birmingham, our young boys are now out on the streets with knives, and so how it's gone so far the other way. So we really need to mobilize ourselves, and where we can work with the young people in our community, whether they listen to us or not. Something will sink in eventually.
Well, hopefully
But I
that's
think,
what this will do.
yeah, and I hope young boys engage with this as well, because they could be so powerful. For me, Sadiq Khan is such an inspiration. Sadiq Khan is a Pakistani man, and he's the Lord Mayor. Who was the last Lord Mayor? Boris Johnson. Just the
Can only
comparison.
go up from there.
Exactly. So I think young boys, should look at people like Riz Ahmed, Sadiq Khan. They're fantastic role models. And I don't just want women to prosper. If only South Asian women prosper, nothing's going to happen. We have to prosper as a community, and we have to do it together. So yeah, we just are here. We have to open our hearts a bit more, I think.
I like that. So I want to make this more personal with you now. So I want to ask you, what was your breakthrough moment? What allowed you to come out being a queer woman, and what gave you the strength to do that?
So my sexuality was never really a big part of my life. Being Pakistani and Muslim was more so my lifestyle. And not that being queer is a lifestyle. But for me, so when these school protests happened, because it was predominantly Pakistan, it didn't start with the Pakistani community. It was it was a anti-abortion group called SPUC, and they did some gaslighting. And then, of course, our people, yes, we're going to be at the front of this argument. And then the Christians just backed off and let our community make a show of themselves. At that time, there were people there who I wouldn't say were homophobic. They were just misguided, because there was a lot of misinformation that was being bandied about. For me personally, a breakthrough was, so in protest of the protests, we led Pride. And when I say we invited all queer Muslim organizations that we could think of, other Muslims, and we led Birmingham Pride. Now, I don't normally do Pride. It was my first Pride parade I'd ever done. But the key thing was that it was the first time in the 22-year history of that event that it was, not white people leading. And actually it was queer Muslims saying, yeah, we're queer and we're Muslim and we're proud. And it was fantastic. And actually thousands and thousands of people came from all over, teachers, people from Birmingham. And for me, what was lovely was when I was going through the crowds, there were South Asian people there, and we'd stop and talk to them, especially elderly people. And it was just really nice. And the breakthrough moment was the fact that people started contacting. So, uncles and aunties that you would think wouldn't even get involved in this, just randomly messaging me saying, oh, I saw this, or I read this article, and they're supportive, and people who are actually starting to think differently and understand. So that for me was a breakthrough moment. I wouldn't say that homophobia has gone away. I wouldn't say any of the hate's gone away. But we're lucky to live in Britain and have that space.
Yeah. On to the next bit then. What is your greatest strength? What gives you strength now going through all that?
I just don't give a shit. Oops, I shouldn't swear, but I just don't care anymore. And I don't think I've ever cared. I think one thing as South Asians we have is this notion of shame, a stigma of shame, basically, and guilt in terms of, oh, am I doing the right thing for my family? Am I not? It's emotional blackmail. And actually that shouldn't exist. And actually women are emotionally blackmailed more so than men are at the emotional needs of men. So, I just don't care. And For me, like, you know why I don't care though? Also, you know, people need to understand people like me are killing themselves in shame or being killed or thrown off buildings by ISIS. That's not our community. That's not what we are. We are not savages. So, you know, we need to have these debates. And, you know, the reason I joined this debate as well, there was a fear on my part and other South Asian queer Muslims and, you know, just South Asian queers, was that actually, will this debate become whitewashed? You know, if we're not bringing the nuance in as people at the intersection of these conflicting communities, you know, how are people going to understand the nuance? And I'm not saying nuance in terms of brushing anything under a carpet, but we have to talk about our communities. We've got the lived experiences. So I think it's really important for us to have these debates, because if you don't, we're going to watch this government. They'll bring in legislations and all of a sudden our communities will be on a back foot. You know, there's no surprise that through COVID that it's our communities that are dying, and, you know, we're still not even being prioritized for the vaccine. So, you know, this is where I just think, like, the youth of today, just get a grip and look, we're so stigmatized as a community that if we don't stick together on these things, we're never going to have a chance. And we can have the arguments, we can have the debates, but let's have them ourselves and then present ourselves, our community, as we want to, not as how with a colonial mindset from some white journalists.
Which is exactly why we're doing this.
Yeah.
So to finish it off, the original last question was going to be, what advice would you give to young women today? I want to change that. What advice would you give to young men today?
So to young men, I would just say, recognizing there's no shame in recognizing privilege. And it's the same conversation I have with my white male friends who will get angry and say they're not privileged. But you have to recognize it. I know I'm privileged. So just as I'm privileged to be sitting here having this conversation with you without death threats, you know, living my life as I want, that's a privilege. But I recognize that. And it's by recognizing that, then I can tell the story. So actually, young people, you know, young boys and young men, you know, just actually recognize how much leniencies you have, and, you know, see the differences between your sisters and the way, you know, your mum or your dad treats you and your sisters, and the little things do add up, you know. And yeah, just open your minds. And actually what they need to understand is, if we look at Sadiq Khan, right, you can only prosper if we take our community with us. So, you know, and we're all out there for one another. So I just think, it's a difficult one, and it's difficult to understand privilege. Nobody wants to say, yeah, I'm privileged, and yeah, I'm all right. But we do. And actually they need to recognize, this is the biggest thing, the fact that as Pakistanis, you know, you have to fight back on this quarter inheritance law. You know, whenever you speak to Pakistani men about it there, why they can change it, because, you know, it doesn't affect them, it's all right for them. And they actually need to understand that as a people, as a nation, as a diaspora, we need to be progressive, and these things of equality need to be implemented. So, you know, we need to push on Imran Khan. You know, he's this big PR man, but actually he's just a middle class appeaser, in my opinion. And, you know, the vulnerable people, the people who really need help, are still struggling in Pakistan. So yeah, I think we have a chance now. We have new leadership, we can prosper, but we need our young boys to rise up and stand beside their sisters, you know, and let the sisters do the talking. Just let them take the microphone.
I'm doing that, sister. I'm doing that.
As you are, yeah, as you are. But, you know, just those everyday things will change things.
I think that's a great way to end it. Yeah. Unless you want to add anything more to that.
No, that's it. Thank you.
I love that. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for that.
No, you're welcome.
I've definitely learned a lot.